Hello, welcome to the Future Proof Masterclass, folks. It's really nice to see you. We are going to kick off with this fascinating topic. It is around conversational AI, and Jurgen is somebody who has been designing conversations and has a fantastic blog, which we'll put in the email replay on teaching computers how to talk. And he will spend the next half an hour or so sharing a presentation on an overview of this topic, which is really at the forefront, the cutting edge of AI and how it's impacting businesses. And then we'll have a chance for questions. So feel free to pop into the chat where you're calling in from, and we will go from here. Jurgen, are you ready?
I am. Welcome, everybody. Yeah, I'd like to start with saying welcome, everybody. Really nice to be here. I prepared, like Diana said, a short presentation just to talk through some topics. And I invite everybody to, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. Maybe I'll read them during the presentation, and otherwise that will come afterwards. I believe everybody can see the presentation is on the screen. Today I will be talking about how computers learn to speak our language. That's why it was called this session, how teaching computers how to talk. I'm going to talk a little bit about why designing for chatbots is surprisingly hard. And I'm going to try to touch also on some topics about how AI will change the future of work and society and everyday life. And especially now that has become a big topic because especially with the advent of LLMs, there's been a lot of stuff that is moving, especially in my industry. So I hope to share some insights there. Really a brief introduction to who I am. I asked Bart just to write I asked him, can you tell me something about me? This is from a little while back, I think 3 months ago, when Bart just started. And the introduction says some interesting facts about me, that I'm a conversation designer and an AI safety researcher. It's in the first line. And I currently work for a Conversation Design Institute. That's correct. That's Training and Certification Institute for Conversational AI. Apparently I'm also a member of the Less Wrong community, and I write a lot about ethics and safety in artificial intelligence. Well, some of this, interestingly enough, is true, but there's also quite some stuff that's not true about this short introduction, especially the fact that I'm not an author of any book right now. I do have a newsletter, but I'm not an author. I'm also not a safety researcher. I don't know anything about AI safety. So we can see that Bart just made this up, right? And we know this is one of the problems that we have currently with this new technology that isn't really completely solved yet. I also want to show you the version I did yesterday, because that was already a little bit better, because it looks like Google Bard is now grounded in Google search. So it actually highlights some things about me that are pulled from other sources. Like I said, I am a conversation designer. I work for Conversation Design Institute. We are a leading provider of conversational AI training and consultancy services. And I am a passionate advocate for conversational AI. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit today, and hope you find it interesting. Usually when I give presentations, we always start with this slide. We've done that for the past 3 years. I've been doing a lot of training and presentations like these. And it used to be that we showed this slide of kind of where the dream or ideal scenario or of where the future or what the future will look like in maybe 10 or 20 years, like the holy grail of conversational AI. And back then that looked like a vision of the future. But I also found this picture of, maybe people have seen this already. This is the Humane pin that was launched, I think, two months ago or even a month ago, which is a wearable, an ambient computing wearable that is voice assisted. It has a little projector. It projects on your hand. So it looks like the future is catching up pretty fast on us, and we live in pretty exciting times. One of the quotes and maybe the conclusions of my whole presentation is that the future is becoming increasingly conversational. This is a quote by Mustafa Suleyman. He's the CEO of Inflection AI. Maybe you know Inflection AI from the AI assistant Pi, which is kind of the competitor of ChatGPT and is a little bit of a more empathetic intelligence. And what he means with the future, and what I mean with when I say the future is going to be conversational, is that more and more things can be organized or operated just through natural language interfaces. If you can ask for it, you can basically get what you want. To give you a small sneak peek of what that looks like in, for example, video. So that was a small demo of a new product that is launching soon. It's text to video. This is a little bit further away from my work as a conversation designer building AI assistants, but this is where the future is going, right? If you can ask for it, you can basically get what you want. Pretty exciting time to be alive, if you ask me. But why now? Why is this happening now? What's behind this whole trend that we're basically seeing now? I think what's really interesting, if you zoom out a little bit and you look at the timeline of where things have been going for a while, is that we started out with personal computers in the 80s, and after that came mobile computers, so interfaces became smaller and smaller. We have now the computer. We have now a very advanced computer all in our pockets. And around 2019, we saw the first major AI assistants or home assistants like Alexa and Google Assistant coming out. And what's really interesting about these platform shifts is that they not only introduced a new technology to our world, they also introduced a new way of interacting with technology and how we need to design for these new channels. So personal computer brought about interface design. The mobile revolution gave us UX design. And with AI assistants, that's conversation design. And conversation design that's the field where I am in as a conversation designer. That's what I do every day. I work on designing helpful and successful chatbots. And in this line of work, that also requires new skill sets and workflows to build out these new products. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. Just to sum up, what have we seen in this timeline? It's not just only a shift in technology; it's also a shift in how we interact with technology. And if I would sum that up in one sentence, it would be instead of us learning how to talk to computers with difficult programming languages, increasingly it becomes easier to teach computers how to talk to us. So we can ask now in natural language what we want, and the computer basically goes off and does it. Conversation design, my bread and butter. What is it? What are we talking about when we are talking about conversation design and chatbots? The easiest way to explain it is that there's, in the interaction between humans and computers, there's always a small disconnect. And that's because there's a bridge between the quote unquote human mind and the artificial minds. And they need different things on a conversation to operate. Through natural language, computers have been able to interpret natural language, so human language. But this unstructured data, natural language, needs to be turned into structured data. And a computer needs intents, entities, context, and variables to basically understand and process what we are asking about. And then natural language creation is when the chatbot responds in natural language to us, and we process this information. Interestingly enough, humans, when they try to understand things, might also need these things, these pieces of information like intent and entities. But that's a very natural thing for us. We don't really have to think about that. We need kind of different things in a conversation, more human things, you could say, like empathy, helpfulness, and a little bit of encouragement. And interestingly enough, that's not something that comes natural to a computer. That kind of needs to be designed into it. And that's where conversation designers come in. That's also the first part of this talk. So I will focus a little bit first on the human side of things, and then we'll talk a little bit about how chatbots work. When we think about conversations and why conversations work, there's a really interesting language philosopher and researcher, Paul Grice, and he wrote extensively about why conversations work and how human conversations work. And he proposed in an interesting research piece called Logic and Conversation that we as humans cooperate with each other when we're in a back and forth of a conversation. And we use things like common ground, mutual knowledge and inferences to collaborate almost in getting what we want out of a conversation. And he wrote down some rules that we all unconsciously adhere to. And he called them maxims, the maxim of quality, quantity, relevance, and manner. And these are kind of unwritten rules that we all abide by when we have a conversation with each other. And we kind of assume these things always in a conversation. So we say we cooperate with each other by saying things that are true, by providing as much information as needed, not too much, not too little, information that is relevant to the context of the conversation, and we try to communicate as clearly as we can. To give you an example of when that breaks, or when we break those rules, comedians do that a lot, or when we joke, there's kind of a surprise effect when we break these rules. A really simple example of that would be if somebody asks you, do you know what time it is? And you say yes, you kind of break the rule of quality and quantity. You're giving an answer, but it's not a useful answer. People want to know the time, right? So that's a way of breaking the rules. Maybe one thing, for chatbots, this is really hard. And for humans, this comes natural. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Language and personality, there's an interesting relationship there that I want to talk about as well. To start off, maybe in the chat, anybody can say, I'm curious, what do you think? How's this one feeling today? A little bit of audience interaction.
How is this picture feeling?
Yeah, how's the building feeling, or what expression emotion can we surprised, right? Surprised, yeah. Slightly horrified, yeah.
Yeah, neutral.
Neutral. Okay. I want to go on vacation. That's more of jealous of the blue sky. I like that. So it's really easy, right? We can see like a face in the building. I think we all do. We kind of do it naturally, and there's even a name for it. It's called pareidolia. And it's really interesting that we have this human tendency to look at the world and see the world in a human lens, and it's the reason we see faces in the sky and why we love Disney characters so much. And these unconscious kind of phenomenon are always aware in our minds, unconscious or not. And these are applied not only to visual stimuli, but also to voices. And interesting research, again, by Clifford Ness and Scott Brave, showed that there is a very deep relationship between language and especially voice and personality. They did research in the early IVR voices, both real and artificial voices. And from their findings, they basically could deduce that when people hear a voice, almost immediately we tend to form an image of a personality to it. So we assign personality to the voice. We can even answer questions about the person that we've talked to just based on their voice. Maybe we answer their gender, we know like their gender, their locale, but also from like hearing their voice, is this going to be a helpful person? Is this going to be a knowledgeable person? These are not, it might not turn out to be true, these assumptions, but within seconds we make these assumptions. And these are really, I think this is really important to understand when we talk to chatbots and voice assistants. This is something that we always do, and we cannot not do it. Another interesting phenomenon that's quite old already by a robotic, it was found by roboticists, Japanese roboticists, and he in research showed that there is a high correlation between perceived likability and human likeliness. So if a robot really looks like a robot, we like it. And if that robot gets a little bit more like eyes and facial features, we like it even more. And then when a robot looks really like us, it's like indistinguishable from us, we love it as well. But there's this mid part, that thing in the middle, where we get kind of an eerie feeling. And that's when our brain cannot really tell whether we are talking to a human or to a robot. And again, this is also something that works with chatbots. But it's very strong, this sense with robots. And this is an image I found from the recent Chinese robot convention. It was last month. I thought these were rather creepy robot heads. And I think we all have an innate reaction to seeing this because it's kind of not completely there yet. Why is this relevant for chatbots? Well, the uncanny valley, as we call it, also exists in chatbots, and it also works when you're just relying on language. And we see that when you have extreme shifts in tone of voice, for example, or when a robot or a chatbot pretends to be human or pretends to have emotions that chatbots cannot have. And you would be surprised how often this happens, because you have to imagine in most chatbot projects, if there's especially in larger companies, it's often not one person working on the chatbot, but multiple people. And if you have multiple writers on a team, conversation designers on a team, they might have their own quirks in writing, and if they all adhere to their own tone of voice, then one chatbot can have kind of a disjointed experience, because at one time it has this English accent, and then it has these Scottish words that it's throwing into. So you get this disjointed experience, and we kind of want to move away from that, because it's people are put off by that quite easily as customers. When we talk about personality in AI assistants, it's also really interesting. I've done now I would say hundreds of projects where we design personalities for chatbots with clients, and we see a lot of recurring personality traits. So empathetic, helpful, approachable, informal, concise. And even though these words are very often repeated, they often mean something different for each brand. And each person. So it's really helpful when you're doing these projects not to only put the words on paper, but also what do we mean when we say we want to be a helpful chatbot. And then maybe one small note or last note on what doesn't work we know, but what does work in chatbots, what does make a persona trustworthy and likable is when it's relevant to the brand, when it resonates with your customer. So if you have an idea of your customer group, you kind of need to know or need to design a persona that fits that type of customer. And then, like I said, you want consistency throughout dialogues and channels. And to the right is an interesting image that I found. Personas are not about demographics or like bio details, because as you can see, Prince Charles and Ozzy Osbourne have a lot of in common with each other, but their personality is not the same. So that's a fun wink to that. Maybe a small last note on conversation design as a practice. Where do we see this now? Where is this relevant? Of course, like I said, I work a lot with clients on enterprise chatbots. These are customer-facing or employee-facing chatbots. So you can also have internal chatbots for IT or procurement. But we also see voice apps on Alexa, for example. There you can create brand experiences there. Conversational IVR. So the old systems were press 1 if you need help with X. Also, these experiences are now turned in more human-like and more natural voice experience with also more natural artificial voices. Robots are becoming, I think, we're going to see more and more of that in our real life. And also in gaming and interactive storytelling, you could say that conversation design has a role to play. The metaverse and virtual human beings, we have to mention those as well. The metaverse seems to, that trend seems to have disappeared a little bit, but maybe it will get back in a few years when it matures. We'll see about that. This, by the way, on the right is my Michaela. I don't know if anybody knows, but it's a virtual influencer. Very interesting. It has, I think it has like 1 million followers. There's a design company behind it, and they basically present her as a brand AI influencer, and they make a lot of money with it. And it's not a real person. Lastly, this is the second part of the talk is about why building chatbots is pretty difficult. So we'll dive a little bit into the inner workings of chatbots. And like I said, that's kind of the other side of the medallion. It's about the artificial mind that needs intense entities and contexts and variables, basically structured data to operate. How do conventional chatbots work? 99% of chatbots that you will talk to on the web or in an app right now are based on conventional intent-based NLU models. And that means that there's a NLU model at the heart of a chatbot. There are intents in a systems. An intent is kind of synonym for a dialogue or a dialogue tree. And under every dialogue is a fixed answer. So a designer has designed a dialogue or an answer for a specific question. And it's basically like, I heard a great analogy. It's like a restaurant menu, but you don't know what's on the menu. So there are certain menu items. You don't see them when you're interacting with the chatbot, but the chatbot, all it's trying to do is slot your question in one of the menu items and then serve you the dish that is most likely to be fit what you are asking for. There are some limitations to how this works. Usually chatbots, it becomes a little bit harder to slot if the scope of your chatbot increases. So 200-300 questions or intents, that's still manageable. But if chatbot becomes much bigger, then they start to struggle to be able to distinguish questions. So there is a scope limitation there, and you have to think about that all the content in there is human curated and designed, and therefore also manually maintained. So any updates, product updates, these you have to do that by hand. And that means that a chatbot project is not just a fun or interesting technological endeavor, it's also a content management operation, in essence. Large language models, the elephant in the room. This is a relevantly really new development, and it also has really impact on how chatbots work. And I'll tell you a little bit how it's changing our world in a second. But for anybody that is completely oblivious to how large language models work, it's very different from NLU models because a large language model only makes predictions based on the question or the prompt that it gets. So a prompt goes in, it goes into the language model, and based on a vast neural network, it will make a prediction about the next token in the sequence. And another way to think about it is it's a really fancy autocomplete, right? I don't know if anybody uses WhatsApp, but if you type a word there, it will also suggest you a next word. That's also kind of a language model. But the difference between that simple application and the large language models that we see today is that these advanced large language models, they know so much more about the relationships between words that their predictions become incredibly accurate, and they know so much more about the language that they've seen. A downside to this, or big difference between the NLU models, is that output is generated, so there's no human curation there, and the output is not fixed. It's non-deterministic, so it's always kind of a probability based on what you put in the model. Another popular analogy is that there are calculators for words. Maybe you've heard this. They are in a way calculators because they are doing really big math equations. But there's two problems with the usefulness of this analogy, and that's why I want to point it out, is that a calculator gives you the same answer every time. That's very different from large language models. You can literally get different results for the same prompt, so they're not robust in that sense. And if a calculator gives you the wrong answer, it's broken. Calculators give you the right answer every time, and if they don't, they're broken, right? Yeah, that's not how it works with large language models. And even Sam Altman has said in interviews, their creativity in a way, and the fact that they get it wrong, quote unquote, can also be seen as a feature. So it's not all bad, but they're just not calculators in that sense. My personal favorite analogy is the electric bike. This focuses on another part of their utility, and that's the fact that, I mean, anybody that has used them, maybe for writing assistance or ideation, large language models, and especially the applications that are built with it, they are going to help us do things much faster. And I think it's really interesting that from the start of this year, nobody had had to start with an empty draft anymore. Like any idea you can put to paper, you can give ChatGPT and you can prompt ChatGPT and it will kind of get you up to speed or give you some ideas. So nobody starts with nothing anymore, which is, I think, a really interesting and a beautiful application of it. And the bike is also a good one because probably you want someone behind the wheel, and it is good to wear a helmet if you want to be safe, meaning that there are some safety precautions that need to be made. Another way of saying that is with large language model applications, it's important to have a human in the loop. The final slide will be about the drawbacks of this new technology and especially applied to chatbots and how you should think about that when you are applying this in a business setting. So if you're in an enterprise and you have customer or employee-facing chatbots, should I not use LLMs in these chatbots, or should I kind of still keep doing things the conventional way, right? I think what's really good to understand, and I think I showed it with the first two examples of my own introduction, to be relevant, large language models need to be grounded in your company data or external sources to kind of make them more truthful and more relevant to your company, because foundation models are built on general knowledge and they can answer a lot of general questions, but they don't have out-of-the-box information about you and your organization, right? So that's really important implication. And honestly, that's just my experience from the projects that we've done this year. It hasn't made building chatbots easier. Actually, building with large language models is really hard, especially because reeling it in and making sure there are no hallucinations and making sure it is grounded in this external data. It is actually adding a layer of complexity also to an operation. So it's a choice to be made if your team is ready for that extra layer of complexity, or if they should maybe mature first in the way they're doing things right now. And then thirdly, as they tend to make stuff up, and this is not by any means a solved problem yet, this can create a liability for businesses, especially if they're used in customer-facing products. So honestly, if I give you just from speaking from my own experience, in all the projects that we run this year, we haven't used it in any customer-facing chatbot yet, just because of the risk that it takes. And I'm talking about chatbots now, right? Because there's other application that might be useful, but not in this sense. And then fourth, the last point is about the fact that LLMs are amazing at information retrieval and generation. But what we see with chatbots is that they become incredibly useful when they can do things for customers. So help them with transactional journeys, maybe cancel your credit card or block a credit card. And it's interesting that those type of implications are much better done by relying on static flows and hard logic than relying on something non-deterministic as LLMs. So what we see now, at least in our world, is that hybrid chatbots that kind of combine the best of both worlds. So they combine the reliability of NLU architecture and maybe the strength of the generation and the flexibility of large language model. That's where we see things moving for now. So it's not one or the other. It's kind of getting the best of both, getting the best out of both. What is the impact on society and work? I think the point that I would like to drive home when it comes to AI is that it's just not only a technological revolution, it's also a societal one. I think what's really interesting for businesses, and I think leadership should really realize, is that people will use AI if you like it or not. So you can tell people not to do it, they will. And we call those people secret cyborgs. So there's quite a lot of there's research into how many people are using it in organizations, even though leadership has forbidden to do so. You would be shocked at the numbers. If anybody's interested, I can provide those an interesting follow-up read about that. So secret cyborgs is kind of an emerging phenomenon, and modern centaurs. I love these words for it. A centaur is, of course, this mythical creature which has the head of a human and then the body of a horse. I think we're going to see more and more people that are empowered by AI and rely on the important and the critical aspects of their own skills, and then for all sorts of easier or more repetitive work will start to rely more on AI tools and kind of they themselves are the human in the loop. Maybe I think this is one of the last slides. The impact on society. I write about this a lot, especially on my newsletter, which is a little bit more focused on the broader impact of AI in society and not just about chatbots. The societal implications I think are quite big. And three of them that I would love to highlight, and maybe there are interesting questions that we can dive into after this. But one I've written about is artificial empathy. So AI companions are on the rise. Apps like Replica, for maybe people know those, are extremely popular, and they certainly question what it means to have authentic relationships when some people find it easier to have an artificial one rather than build a friendly friendship with somebody that is complex and human and has needs and wants of their own, etc. Synthetic voices are becoming more and more indistinguishable from real voices. It's really easy nowadays to clone a voice. You can do that with less material than ever. So if you have a 30-second recording of a loved one, of a friend, you can already put that recording in a tool, and there will be a voice clone rolling out that sounds kind of like the voice in the recording, and then you can make that voice say whatever you want. That's kind of scary, but it's getting more cheaper to make, and virtually anybody has access to this technology between now and a year. And then I think misinformation is a big one. It's not like this problem wasn't there already, but I think it's exacerbated by AI, and especially the cost of creating alternate narratives is going down incredibly. And it's just, I think we already lived a little bit in a post-truth world, but I think what's really hard to come to terms with, but we really have to, is that in not too long, I think, or emails or chat conversations, phone calls, maybe social media posts, many of that stuff could be generated by AI without us being able to tell the difference anymore. And I think that's an interesting world that we're going ahead to. It's not all doom and gloom, but we have to be prepared for that. The last two memes that I want to end off with is that there is a lot of noise. There's a lot of hype in this space, and it's always good to realize that the people that are actually building AI, that's quite a smaller number than the people using it, and it's definitely a smaller number of people talking about AI. So beware of experts that aren't experts, or just saying things because they think they are experts. You have to do your due diligence there. And I think everybody that says it's going to be easy to build these applications is lying, because working with large language models is actually quite hard. Yeah, that was my well, it's not 40 minutes talk. I hope you found it inspiring.
Fascinating.
Cannot wait to hear some questions.
Well, thank you, Jurgen. That was so interesting, and we've had an active back and forth in the chat. And if I might, Selena, can I ask you? You were talking about man-made and bias. Can you unmute and sort of ask a question relative to our chat around that?
Sure. I mean, I think, hi, yeah, again, lovely, fantastic talk. Thanks very much for that. I think it was just in response to Andrew talking about whether AI reduces the risk of unconscious bias or increases it. And I just happened to be reading, I had just read a book recently called Man-Made by Tracy Spicer, who talked about the perspective of, women and data. And she had the perspective that because AI is learning from these vast data of what has gone before, as opposed to what will be, the embedded biases of the past just happens to roll into it also in the choices that the people are, the creators of the AI, in what data sets they are using and how clean they are and that sort of thing. So there was a concern. She was concerned that actually AI amplifies old biases and gender stereotypes. For example, like a chatbots with voices. I think Jurgen, you're talking about. When you hear a voice, just assign a personality to it, and she was noting that many authoritative voiced chatbots are maybe a male voice, and then the very more service-oriented ones are, and the polite ones are female. Anyway, so that I just what your thoughts were on that.
I mean, it's a very interesting discussion. On the artificial voices, it was really interesting because when the first home assistants came out, they were all female voices, or most of them were female voices, and that was one of the big critiques about these home assistants, that they were subservient assistants in the home. And they all had female voices, right? Are we not like, isn't that a stereotype that we're kind of doing, that's being extravated there? And what you see is under some pressure, these assistants have now added multiple voices. So at least for the Google Assistant, I know you have a male and a female voice, or at least you have a few to ask, to choose from. I believe the same is now true for Alexa. So under pressure of open debate, there's also been, I think, some strides made. I think with large language models, it's kind of a resurgence of the same discussion, and it becomes relevant again to protect these values and to make sure these biases don't get reinforced by the technology. I think an interesting example of that, where we see it not working, is if you ask, I saw this today, for example, on social media, you can try this out yourself if you have ChatGPT, and you can use DALL-E. If you ask it to generate a doctor helping a patient, and you do that 10 times, you will see different types of people. And that's because in the background, ChatGPT actually adds a prompt, or a little bit extra detail to the prompt, where it prompts the system to be diverse. Interestingly enough, so they've tried there to nudge the model to be diverse in the output. Interestingly enough, if you do give yourself a more specific prompt, so a doctor that helps someone in his practice, and he's holding a stethoscope, and so you add some details, then ChatGPT skips this diversity prompt, and then they're all white doctors. So if you then do it 10 times, they're all white male doctors. That's a problem, right? And it shows that there is inherent biases that are literally encoded in these systems, and by people using them every day in all kinds of stuff, this is also having real world impact. So yeah, I think it is something we need to be aware of, and it is not, I would say, researched enough yet when it comes to large language models. We should do a lot more.
May I have a follow-up question, Diana, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting though, because Andrew also made the point, does AI then, is it a positive in terms of addressing unconscious bias? For example, is our chatbots are supposed to reflect the world we live in, where it may well be that, it's a predominance of male white doctors, or maybe in Perth, just have more Asian doctors that fill up more than half of the medical course? Or is it there to address this by bringing diversity in where it may not actually be reflected in society? I'm just curious how you design a conversation. Do you try and reflect what is, or are you trying to direct it in bend the trajectory towards what should be?
I mean, I think that's a really good question that I honestly don't have an answer to. And interestingly, the people that are now answering the questions are the people building these tools, right? So ChatGPT and DALL-E, they had to answer that question, and they chose, for example, that DALL-E has kind of this diversity prompt in it. Every time you ask it to generate a doctor or a nurse or whatever kind of stereotypical thing you can think of. But I think it's a really good question that honestly I'm happy to say that I don't have an answer to. Maybe somebody else has an opinion. I'd love to.
I do. I have spoken to people about, how they have abandoned some of their AI pilots because of bias. It's easier in a company where you say, I want to have a diverse population because I believe that that's in line with the values of the company and ultimately shareholder returns, because we believe, more diverse. Because it's interesting when you say, well, maybe we should bend it. We should put rules in so that it could be what it should be. Because then the fascinating question is who gets to decide what it should be?
Exactly.
What's the right, the ethics of it become really interesting.
I mean, one small note on ChatGPT, for example, was also interesting. Like in first, like there's also political research in the political like kind of inclinations that it has. Then they kind of plotted ChatGPT in centrist left politics, like in its views, basically. Yeah. And then there were people that said, well, personally, I want a right wing AI. Like I want liberal GPT. And I think there are people that will fight or strive for having that. And that they say, well, I want a language model that represents my views and my subgroup. So it might be that we're going to see these things come about in the coming years. It's really interesting. Yeah.
Other questions? Please feel free to unmute. Otherwise, I got a lot.
I was wondering a bit about the matrix and about when are the machines going to take over and get us? You have this kind of worrisome thing in the back of your head, kind of, I don't know how much empowerment I want to do for something that I like this. So I just wonder kind of what the rattle is about how far are we really going and who's actually in charge. I feel less and less in charge all the time.
Well, I feel less in charge because of the point that I made last, is that I cannot able to distinguish anymore so well when something is generated by AI. I already feel like that is a little bit of a loss of control. And then on kind of how far will we go with integrating, I think there are a few, like, I think this will become over time a personal question, but there's like the two kind of metaphors that they use centaurs and cyborgs. And centaurs, people kind of that use AI as kind of an extension of themselves. It's kind of these tools that we have next to it, but we rely on ourselves to make the final call. Kind of we are the expert in the loop. And then the cyborgs are the people that will go kind of the extra step, and they will be the ones that kind of choose to, when it's possible, to go to become one with the AI, right? So I want to augment myself with something artificial. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting debate, and I don't know what the timelines are on that. The experts really differ there. So I'll leave that up to anybody to decide. And I'll leave it to anybody what they want to become later, a cyborg or a centaur.
There's more choices than that, but
sure.
Carol popped in the chat. She said, how do we experience artificial empathy? What do users experience internally when a chatbot conveys that it understands what is important to the user?
It's a really good question. I personally, I love analogies, and the analogy I use is, or how I like to think about it, is literature. If you read a good book, you care for the character in the book. You care for the story, even though you're reading a novel, right? It's these are not real people, these are not real situations, it's not real what's happening in the book, and still it can hit you on an emotional level. You can care about that story. And the interesting thing, I think, that this is also what's happening with chatbots or with artificial AI companions. There is a suspension of disbelief that we have when the experience is as human-like as it can be, where we are willingly like suspending kind of our disbelief, and we feel the feelings. And part of that, interestingly enough, is a choice. Like we are doing that willingly. We are allowing that to happen because we like that. So a lot of people, that's I think what is the power of AI companions. They work not just because these chatbots are so good, they also work because our brain is so good. Like we want this, right? It's also an effort from the human side. So we are as much part of that as the AI, I would say, in that relationship.
That's really interesting. Andrew, one last question. You get the last one.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a question or just quick reflection that reacting to Carol mentioned this artificial empathy, because, this title really attracted my attention in terms of the conversational language. One immediate application or implication I'm sure many people have thought about this already, is that in the context of coaching, right? So the company hiring executive coaching with a lot of money and with a very little questionable outcome. And then when it comes to the biases, and AI potentially can be very unbiased or asking the real question regardless who you are. And I think the AI, when they decide the context or entity or the intent, probably more, how should I say, can be more unbiased than general human coach. Mm-hmm. From the coaching perspective, I'm also thinking there were probably certain type of people probably more comfortable responding to this artificial empathy instead of talking to the real coach. So I'm talking out loud mode here. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm just thinking, gosh, because I'm being involved in this coaching business for some years, and having the unbiased ability asking a really critical, real question is really an artful craft for the very experienced coach. And AI potentially maybe can do that better. It's like an AI invest analyst to a certain extent. So just kind of the quick application I'm thinking, and I'm pretty certain somebody already work on it at this moment.
Yeah, maybe I have two things to add to that. What's really interesting is that and we don't. I mean, I think your example is interesting, like coaching, but we also already see this in. I came across it in a banking chatbot, for example. People tell a lot of banking chatbots that they're having experiencing money problems, and that's because they rather often tell a chatbot than straight call to a human, and that's because chatbots don't judge. Talking to a chatbot, to a system, is a judgment-free space, right? It's very safe. And I think that's what's really interesting about talking to computers and knowing when you're talking to a computer is that it's a safe experience. I'm in control what I ask, and like nobody's watching over my shoulder about what I'm talking about, right? And maybe one example in the coaching space is, I don't know if anybody knows about Furhead. It's a really cool company that kind of built a torso of a human, but it's still fairly robotic. I would say it's on the good side of the uncanny valley. Like, it's pretty likable, and you can practice interview questions with that. And it's a really safe and interesting way to practice for an interview without having the feeling that you're doing something wrong, or somebody is like making fun of you when you ask a stupid question or don't respond in the right way, or you're not as presentable as you thought you would be, right? So that's one of the applications that I've seen that made your example made me think of.
Whoops. Fantastic. Well, that's been really interesting. And I have to say that this is something that has just begun in many companies. And actually, Jurgen, OpenAI isn't even available in Hong Kong. So we have this interesting experience where, often we can't even get the same kind of access in the same kind of way as you can in some other places. But I feel like the takeaway really is that it's at the beginning. It's kind of been here for a while, but to me, based on my research, it's at an inflection point where we are really about to see this take off in so many companies as part of work, as part of our consumer experience. And in a way, one of the biggest things is to just understand what's going on, so that when we are the human talking to the computer, we have a better understanding of what is possible, and also, good and bad. So thank you. It's so interesting. And I, as a future of work person, I'm like, conversational designer to me is like one new completely new job of the future. So I'm kind of intrigued by that too. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody. We will put a replay into your email boxes for those of you who signed up. And I highly recommend Jurgen's newsletter. It is so fascinating. And that is the reason that we first got connected. And so we will put that into the replay as well. In fact, Fez just popped it into the chat if you can't wait for the replay. So thank you for your time, Jurgen, and thank you for all of you guys.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Diana. Thank you, everybody, for the great questions and the opportunity to talk to you today.